in one sense, MEF kind of started as an accident. I mean, I wish I could say I had this grand vision of creating an organization that would, do these things. But in fact, like most things, the beginnings of projects, are mired in the details. MEF started in the late 1980s and early 1990s. I'm a professor at the University of Massachusetts, and I was. This is before MEF even existed, even before I'd even thought about any kind of organization like this. I was a professor I am still a professor at the University of Massachusetts, but I was teaching a class at that time, 1990, 1991, that was, a large-scale introduction to mass communication, one of these large, first-year classes. And during the course of that, I thought, well, if I could get people to really, to have a kind of critical, analytical way of thinking about media that's really important to them, that'll be one way of getting them to, to have that distance from the world. And so I said, well, what's really important in the culture, and what's really important in the culture, and still is very important in the culture, is music videos. And so I started to, how do we understand music videos? And as I started to look at that, as I started to develop materials, pedagogical materials, teaching materials around that, I started to, develop. I used to bring in videotapes and put them in the VCR and show, a clip, and then take another one out and put another one in. And after a while, I decided to, it'd be much easier if I was to edit things together. And so I slowly started to edit music videos together. And actually over the course of a few years, in fact, I started this, I would say, in the mid-1980s. And over the course of a few years, I eventually produced this standalone piece that in fact was the first thing that the Media Education Foundation distributed, called Dream Worlds, which was to do with images of women on MTV and its connection to sexual violence and power. And I showed in my class, and it seemed to be pretty useful to getting people to think critically about images that were very, very important to them, about images that they really identified with, and seemed to give them an analytical way of having some distance from them. So I thought, if it's useful to me, it might be useful to other teachers as well. And so I did a small mailing to other communication departments, to women's studies departments, making it available. And in fact, at this point, it was being sold through the university. So whatever money was coming in, and it wasn't very much, but was going back to the university and to the department. And so, we distributed, not very many copies of the tape. And then, lo and behold, I think it was May of 1991, I received a letter from MTV Networks. And the letter was what's called a cease and desist letter. That said I was using their copyrighted materials, that the videos belonged to them, and that I didn't have permission to use them, and that I had to stop using them and actually record all the videos that I'd sent out because I was in violation of copyright law. I replied to them saying, actually, I wasn't in violation of copyright law because within the copyright law of 1996, there is a very, very smart amendment, or a very smart section of that, called fair use, that says that for purposes of teaching, criticism, review, etc., you can use someone else's copyrighted materials without their permission. And that's exactly what I was doing. This was for educational purposes. I wasn't, and it was designed it had an educational function. So I wrote that back to them. At the same time, the letter they sent, the cease and desist letter, came both to myself and to the university. And at that point, when bureaucracies get involved, things become very confusing and things are not so clear cut. And even though I was very clear that, I was protected under this, and that, in fact, I thought, we should make a kind of public case around it, because it was an opportunity to make a statement about free expression. It was an opportunity to make a statement about academic freedom. The university wasn't quite so convinced. And so, in fact, I decided at that point that it would be better if I split off from the university around this case and dealt with this on my own. And so actually, that was a point at which I formed the Media Education Foundation. And initially, it was to distribute just this one videotape, Dream Worlds, without involving a very kind of complex bureaucracy at the university. So that was the start of MEF, was actually as a response to a threat by MTV to try and stop distribution of this educational videotape I produced. Now, once we did that, once I formed MEF, I started to distribute DreamWorks through that, and money came in from that. And MEF is a non-profit organization. It's not a business. It's a non-profit organization, which means all the money that comes in, is used then for the mission of the organization. So as the money came in from that, I decided, well, perhaps I can put it into another production, and we started to think about how we could fund new productions by selling videotapes, and well, I was going to say DVDs, but selling videotapes at that time, and it's gone from that. It's gone from that single videotape at the start to where we are right now, which is in the intervening 14 or 15 years, we've produced something close to 50 videotapes and now DVDs. At any given time, we have 4 or 5 productions, that are ongoing, and then we have the other half of the organization then deals with distributing it, with distributing those programs. And again, from the perspective that producing it is not enough. I've always been the thing I've always been driven by is producing great things is not enough. That unless someone sees what you've produced, that they're not really having the kind of educational effect that you want them to have. And so we put equal emphasis both on producing really, programs on really important issues, on cutting edge issues that that we have to deal with, and at the same time making sure that they get out to places, they get out to classrooms, they get out to community groups, they get out to churches, they get out to all kinds of places where you need to have those kinds of discussions. To fulfill this kind of dual mission of both production and distribution actually requires quite a big staff. And so the Media Education Foundation right now has 16 full-time staff. About half of those people are involved in production. The other half are involved in marketing and distribution. And in fact, every semester we also have somewhere between 8 and 12 interns that come sometimes from local colleges, but are actually increasingly starting to come from colleges around the country, and in fact sometimes from around the world. To participate in what we do. So it's actually a very varied and diverse organization that has full-time staff involved in a number of different things, and also has the energy that interns bring as they learn and experience what exactly is involved in both production and distribution.